What's up, guys? Today we're going to be talking about the brand new Pickleball Apes Charm series. This is Pickleball Apes' take on a full foam core paddle, and it is actually pretty different from what the rest of the competition is doing. But before we get into that, we'll go over the price and specs and then break down the paddle for you. This paddle is going to be $200, but if you use discount code PBStudio, that'll shave it down to $180. As far as the specs go, there are three different shapes that you can buy. There's the V, which is the wide body and the one that I've put my time on. There's the S, which is a hybrid, and then the X, which is an elongated paddle. On the V right here, it comes in at a swing weight of 112 and a twist weight of 7.19. The hybrid is 116 swing weight and a twist weight of 6.16. And then the elongated X is 123 swing weight, which is definitely on the heavier side, and then a twist weight of 6.13. The only thing I would say about the elongated is that if you are sensitive to high swing weight paddles or paddles that you feel are heavy, then the X is probably not going to be for you. At 123 swing weight, that is starting to creep into the heavier realm. However, if you're used to something like a Carbon 1 Genesis, then I really don't think you need to worry that much. Okay, now that we've got the initial specs out of the way, let's talk about what actually makes this paddle unique, and that's this core right here. So this is actually a cutout of the core, and first of all, you'll just see that this looks extremely wonky, but the main thing is that if you overlay this on top of the paddle, you can see that there's these cutouts in the corner here. This is actually very similar to what they did on the Harmony series, where they put these polyurethane foam inserts here, and they do claim that it does some things like vibration dampening and makes off-center shots feel a little bit better. Personally, I don't know if I fully agree with that, but that is what they claim. And then the other big part of it, which is probably going to be very hard to see on camera, maybe we'll slap some B-roll on screen, is that the core actually has these horizontal incisions on it. And the idea behind that is it'll allow the core to bend and flex more. So as you hit the ball, the idea is it'll just kind of cup the ball more, allow for more dwell time. They're claiming it's not a drastic trampoline effect, but it is actually kind of interesting. They sent us two cores, and the one with the incisions definitely bends more freely than the version that does not have it. So this is kind of this paddle's claim to fame, or what is going to make it interesting. We haven't really seen anyone put incisions in the core this way. The only types of incision, if you want to call it, is literally just holes in the paddle, like the Carbon Genesis. So anyways, that's the core and design of this paddle, and kind of what makes it more unique than some of the other options out there right now. All right, now let's talk about how this paddle actually plays. I think it's going to fill an area in the market that really hasn't been touched by too many people. The only paddles that really come to mind that have kind of made an attempt was the Enhanced Gen 4.5 and then the Carbon True Foam Genesis, where to me, this is probably in the upper all-court category. Maybe at best, it's in the low power category area, but to me, it's not an overwhelming power paddle. And I actually think that's a good thing. I know that power is kind of this thing that everyone's chasing right now and everyone is after, and it's like the flashy hot thing. But genuinely, I think most amateur players would play better with less power in their game. Look, paddles like the Boomstick are amazing. The Loco, Inferno, all of these paddles that have a lot of pop and power, I love them. I use them. The Loco is currently my main, but I do think that a lot of players out there would benefit from having less power and pop. Pop in particular is something that I think gets people into a lot of trouble when they're in the mid-court or even at the kitchen and they pop up a ding. So I know that everyone's going to hear upper all court or maybe low end of power and kind of immediately check out and go, it's not a power paddle. I'm out. Personally, I wouldn't check out quite yet. I do think that maybe there are some drawbacks to this paddle, but if you're someone who can generate their own power and you're not chasing a ton of pop and power, then I think the Charm might fit you. One of the characteristics of the Charm that's different from most of the foam paddles coming out right now is that it has a softer, more plush and dense feel compared to some of the other paddles out there, like the Inferno, the Loco, or the Boomstick, where they kind of have this more hollow sensation. They're very poppy. They feel a little bit stiffer. The Charm doesn't really have that. So if you're someone that likes a plusher, softer ball contact when you hit, then the Charm does that better than some of the other options out there right now. And I think because of that softer, more plush feel, it actually makes the power of this paddle feel more deceptive. Historically, I think pickleball players have kind of been trained to associate loud sound, hollow, slow and stiff with a lot of power, and generally that has been true. But I do think that if you actually lay into this ball on a drive or a serve, or you even catch a really clean counter, I actually do think it has a very healthy amount of pop and power, but because of that softer plush feel, it makes you feel like you aren't actually hitting the ball as hard as something like a boomstick, where it's very loud, it's very stiff, and the ball just feels like it wants to jump right away. I don't think the Charm competes with the boomstick in terms of pop and power, but I do think you're getting more than probably what you feel like you're getting out of it. And because of just the general feel of this paddle, I do find that moving the ball around the court, drops, resets, dinks, generally speaking, feel very good, and I feel like that's more of the strong suit of this paddle. To me, it excels more in the soft game, and then when you want offense, you have it, but it's not going to get you in trouble most of the time. The only caveat I would give to that compared to some of these newer power paddles, again, particularly like the Boomstick and the Loco, those paddles tend to have very large sweet spots, and the sweet spot to me on the Charm is kind of the drawback. I don't think it's a bad sweet spot in that when you miss off center, the ball actually just dies and doesn't go anywhere, kind of like a paddle tech. I actually feel like the energy response feels relatively consistent across the face, but the feel as you move away from the center of the paddle changes drastically. And for me, that started to feel like more of the deal breaker with this paddle. As I would go from center just out, half an inch, inch and a half, it just kept drastically changing. Whereas on the Loco and Boomstick, I'm very used to a consistent feel across the face. I really don't find that as you miss, the feedback changes a lot. Whereas on this, it just started to feel more jarring, kind of like I was getting some vibrations through my arm, and it just wasn't very pleasant. I don't know that it's gonna bother everyone, but for whatever reason, I'm just kind of sensitive to it. And I just found that it was getting really annoying. Every time I missed off center, I absolutely knew I missed off center, and I really didn't enjoy feeling that. Now, there are a lot of people out there who love that feedback. They want to know when they hit the ball so that they can make corrections on the next shot. Personally, for me, I'm not a huge fan of that. So to me, I think it's less of the paddle actually having a poor sweet spot that doesn't return energy, and more about the feel changes a lot as you get out towards the edges. Now, I will say I did slap some weight on this paddle. I did about 4.5 inches of 1 gram per inch at 3 and 9 on the sides of the paddle. And I did find that that took away some of that harsher vibrating feeling that I was getting. It didn't entirely go away, but it was enough for me to stop thinking about it all the time. So if you are someone who is willing to tinker with your paddle, I do think you can help eliminate some of that issue with weight. Now, as far as the new core technology goes, I don't really know if I'm feeling or observing the flex that they're claiming. I'm not going to say it's doing nothing. I have a feeling if you did take away those incisions, the paddle probably would feel different. So whether or not this new core design is actually doing something that's crazy different in terms of performance, that kind of remains to be seen. So overall, I think this paddle's good. I think the main problem I have in terms of a recommendation is, to me, one of the most direct competitors in the space it's like kind of trying to occupy would be the J2 FC Plus. I feel like they're just in a very similar territory. One of them may have slightly more pop or power, but I don't find that they're worlds apart. And the advantage that the FC Plus has, in my opinion, is that the sweet spot is much larger and you don't get that big drop off in terms of feel as you get out towards the edges. And with them occupying the same price range, I just don't really know why I would choose the Charm over something like a J2 FC Plus. And I'm specifically talking about the FC Plus. I do think that the NF would be a little stiffer, a little more poppy, and it wouldn't be as direct of a comparison to the Charm. But overall, I feel like the Pickleball Apes and the Honolulu are going to be occupying a similar segment of the market, and which one you want to pick is going to come down to pretty small things, honestly. One, how much you value the sweet spot. In my opinion, it's definitely larger on the Honolulu, but they also use pretty non-standardized shapes, and not everyone loves those. And Pickleball Apes is using much more regular shapes. So if that's more your jam, then you may want to pick the Pickleball Apes. But overall, I'm glad to see a company trying to fill more of this area in the market, because while everyone is just chasing max power, I don't know that everyone needs or even necessarily wants that. While I do think that the sweet spot right now is kind of the downfall of this paddle, and I don't want to make it sound like it's terrible. It's not a bad sweet spot. It's not like a paddle tech where it's just going to be extremely frustrating and you need to be highly skilled. But if you're used to some of these oversized sweet spots, this definitely does feel like it's a step down. So anyways, those are my early thoughts. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.